noise was getting more sonorous. I got the impression that the team outside had made a decent enough dent on one part of the door and had all started concentrating on that. I'm not the slightest bit involved in anti-terrorism. I don't give a track about what Earth does. I doubt that fact matters as much to the gentleman outside as meeting the monthly quota for anti-terror operations, said Warden. As long as your signing hammer is still functioning by the end of the week, they may even be able to earn a funding increase. I tried playing one of the big cards in my hand. You know Mr. Henderson isn't going to be terribly pleased about his son's special treat being ruined by his hero getting arrested and tortured. She placed a hand on her chin thoughtfully. Actually, Mr. Henderson has long borne a grudge against the Immigration Department. I may be able to shift the blame entirely to them. It can hardly be considered my fault that she failed to apply for the right permissions. Nay, I repeated, triumphantly stabbing a finger at her as if I were pinning the word to a corkboard. You said may. You can't be certain he won't take it out on you. And you can't be certain he will. Welcome to your new life on the ocean of uncertainty that is the Henderson Corporation. She met my gaze, one side of her upper lip stabbing upward in distaste. I've had to put up with it for a lot longer than you have. My chest deflated, and my arms fell loosely to my sides. My gun brushed my leg like a faithful dog reassuring its downhearted master. Back to plan A, then, I muttered, turning to go. Of course, I wouldn't come more back around as if mounted on a slow, lazy Susan. What do you want? Your pistol, she said, nodding toward my dangling hand. I have been feeling more and more often in the last few days that I need a means of defense. Do you even know how to use a blaster? I would just feel more comfortable with it in my possession. I looked down at my gun. I fancied that it was looking up at me with big brown puppy dog eyes. Below me I heard the whine of bending metal. I reached for one last attempt at reason. This gun may be the only defense we'll have if pirates get on board. That was precisely my thinking. And the specific pirates I am concerned about are the very recently recruited ones who may or may not already be on board the ship. I gave in. While I wasn't sure what game I was playing with Daniel, I knew exactly which one I was currently playing with Warden. Some hybrid of chess and Russian roulette, and I didn't have the rule book. I toyed briefly with the idea of starting a game of Clue with her in the starring role, then sulkily threw my gun onto the bed. The airlock's exterior door rattled aside with some difficulty, having significantly changed shape since the last time it had opened, and the lead soldier found himself standing in the entryway with his rifle still poised stupidly in mid-smash. Miss Warden's datapad was directly in front of his face, displaying an official-looking certificate with a large and ominous seal. I am Penelope Warden, Divisional Head of the Henderson Corporation and Registered Notary. Here are my credentials, she said, pausing for the briefest possible amount of time for each comma. All interactions with my client, Mr. Jack McKeown, must now go through me. I am his representative for all matters related to his application for asylum. The soldiers leaned in finely honed military unison, to read the small print. With their all-black helmets and shiny black body armor sculpted into the shape of ideal human musculature, they looked like a blackberry bush swaying in the breeze. They were all wearing black balaclavas under their helmets, but I asked the one in front. I was standing behind Warden, trying not to look like a schoolboy getting his angry mother to confront the headmaster. I waved cockily, and some of the gazes turned to me. One of the soldiers, it was hardly worth differentiating them, decided that the best approach to Warden was to pretend she wasn't there. I wished I'd thought of that when we'd first met. Do you or do you not have the necessary permissions to enter the United Republic? He asked gruffly, with a menacing glare. Warden immediately sidestepped to intercept it. My client does not currently possess the necessary permissions. However, United Republic law states that an entrant without permissions may remain in transit regions for a period of 24 hours in order to lodge an application for asylum. The soldiers started grumbling anxiously, having psyched themselves up for a bout of skull cracking that was slipping ever further from their grasp. One of the actually eligible for asylum. Warden was ready for that one. She smartly swiped the certificate on the pad aside to reveal a highlighted section of legal document. Indeed, United Republic law states that an individual becomes eligible for asylum if there is strong evidence to the effect that their physical well-being is under threat by a ruling authority. And is it? It is. Mr. McKeown is in extreme danger of being physically brutalized by a team of 8 government soldiers for not possessing permission papers. The shrewd one figured it out first. You mean us? The law of the United Republic states only that the threat be created by a ruling authority, said Warden, folding her datapad under her arm and standing fully straight to signal her victory. It does not state that the ruling authority cannot be its own, and we have all the evidence we need that the threat exists because I am currently addressing it. The men had been defeated by the very bureaucracy they zealously enforced, and they knew it. They shifted guiltily, looking sadly at their weapons, as if they'd just realized that they'd shown up in tuxedos to a beach party. But then the shrewd bracket started with a realization and threw up an upward-pointing index finger. Ah, wait a minute, there's a fault in your logic. Warden's half-smile triumphantly froze. Is there? You say he's eligible for asylum because we were going to physically assault him. But if we don't physically assault him, then he's not eligible at all, is he? A moment's absolute stillness, then Warden sighed in irritation through her teeth. I should have realized. You're right. You are entirely authorized to brutalize Mr. McKeown, as long as you do not brutalize Mr. McKeown. She let that sink in for a moment, the two parties staring at each other across the ship's threshold. The shrewd bracket's shoulders slowly sank. Well, he still has to leave, said the team leader. Absolutely, said Warden. She turns to me. Daniel is picking up Jemima on a ticket. Yeah, possibly. Who's Jemima? Mr. McKeown will be out of your hair within a couple of hours. In the meantime, don't hesitate to leave. She probably intended to remain standing defiant as the door closed in the soldiers' faces, but it got stuck halfway. We stared at each other through the gap for a while, before the soldiers quietly walked away, muttering. The one bringing up the rear looked briefly over his shoulder. We like your books, by the way. Chapter 12. It was about an hour before Daniel returned for an issue. The selection of tools available on the ship was, of course, pathetic, so I was using a meat tenderizer I'd found in the breakfast nook. So Warden had figured out that I was planning to cross the Black. Her having my gun was going to make it difficult to maintain control of the ship if I started flying into suspicious places. But she obviously didn't know me well enough yet. She thought that would make me give in. She herself had made it impossible for me to return to Ritzico City. I just have to take a more delicate approach, or failing that, threaten to beat her to death with my own severed leg. I tried the opening and closing mechanism a few times. It worked relatively smoothly. It wasn't going to be completely airtight, but we still had the internal door, and I probably wouldn't need to do any EVA work. Even if I did, the gap wasn't enormous. It wouldn't suck all the air out of the internal atmosphere if I worked fast. I tested the opening mechanism one more time, and saw Daniel at the entrance to the docking bay, accompanied by, presumably, Jemima, who, to my relief, was not the ironically named ex-wrestler bodyguard my imagination had been furnishing, but a girl his age, with bright pink hair and a baggy hoodie matched paradoxically with tight black leggings. I thought you were coming back in the quantum, I said. Daniel's face was very red, and sweat glistened on his brow. He started a little at my question, having been gazing fixedly at the girl. What? I wanted to show it to her from outside first. It's cool, isn't it, Jemima? She was looking over the ship's ample curves. So this is yours? She asked. Then she glanced nervously over her shoulder at the docking bay entrance. He took a step closer and pretended to appraise the ship, arms folded. Yep, that's my ship, he said, trying to sound nonchalant, but emphasizing the "my" weirdly. I just got my own ship now, no big deal. I leaned on the door frame and stared at him. His eyes kept flicking over to her, studying her reaction, but her own gaze was reserved only for switching between Jemima had been watching down. "You're not Jacques Leclerc." She didn't say it with the tone of one triumphantly revealing subterfuge. It was a matter-of-fact statement, mixed with the slight bafflement of one wondering why no one else has seen what seemed obvious to them. Even so, I jumped and almost lost my balance. "What?" Jemima shrugged. "Well, you know, the real Jack McKeown wouldn't come out and fly other people's ships, because he, writes books full-time." Daniel laughed a bit too much again. "No, really, it's actually the real, actual Jack McKeown. Your dad could call him for me." "Your dad was probably, lying to you, like he did when he said he didn't break Mr. Peterson's legs when he was failing grade." Daniel seemed about to say something, then fell silent, as a thoughtful look crossed his face. Apparently this extremely compelling point had not occurred to him. It was time to flick the switch in my head. I laughed good-naturedly, making a pretty convincing job of it if I do say so myself. "I know how it looks," I said, smiling in a crinkly-eyed, favourite uncle kind of way. "But you'd be surprised how little money novels make these days. And a writer's life is never going to be enough for someone who's used to space adventuring, is it?" She touched her chin, looking at me with reassuring uncertainty. "Yes." The entrance to the docking bay opened noisily, and Jemima almost jumped out of her skin. She let out a sigh of relief when she saw that it was only one of the soldiers, smartly relieving a single member of the armed group that had been watching us vigilantly for the entire hour. "Hey, can we go inside now?" she said, with one last look behind her. Daniel beamed at the suggestion. I moved out of the doorway to let them in, keeping an eye on Jemima. I offered a cheery wave to the armed guards, then closed the exterior door. All throughout and following takeoff, Jemima stood over me to watch the scenery from the best spot. But once we were out of Cloud Castle's designated clearing and back in the real clouds, the scenery was swiftly reduced to flat, unbroken yellow while we were flying through custom. "So was it like a Santa Claus thing?" she asked. Most of her jitteriness seemed to have mysteriously evaporated since our departure. "What?" I said. "You know, like, you're not Jack McKeown, but you're one of Jack McKeown's helpers." She gave a little twitch at the corner of her mouth, the sort of thing nervous people do that would only turn into a full smile if someone else smiles first. Daniel obligingly burst into another of his desperate overlong laughs. Of course, he was hovering around too. He had to maintain a constant orbit about 3 feet from Jemima. He had a Botox band of his very own, not far enough to separate.
I know how hard it is to sleep without your apparatus.
His incredibly obvious crush.
How effective was the sleep?
I said reflectively.
Did that
Trying
work?
to get into the mindset of the real Jacques McKeown, and after a couple of dry heaves, I had concluded that he would be pretty testy by this point. Luckily, that would require very little acting. "No, seriously, it's bad checked him out on the idea network, and that was his name," said Daniel, confirming Miss Warden's. Transport before star piloting officially became a thing, and it's always easier to con people with the truth. "I guess," said Jemima. Then, "Oh, wow!" Her eyes flew to the blue outside. The pollution clouds parted like hideous yellow curtains. the Jemima. I felt a surge of regret for having given water my blaster because I had a sudden longing to put the end in my mouth. Oh, said Jemima awkwardly. That's cool. Hey, I said brightly, leaping to the rescue, as star pilots tend to do. Where do you crazy kids want to go, anyway? Oh, yeah, said Jemima, relievedly looking away from Daniel's. I was going to say, I can't stay out too long. I didn't actually tell my mum that I was going out. It's cool, I probably wasn't going to stay out very long either, said Daniel hastily. Where do you want to go? Jemima glanced back at space through the plexiglass like a diver trying to pick from a menu. I'm fine with wherever you want to go. I'm literally fine with anywhere. Excuse me, I interjected, before the discussion continued its round. We've got to hang out for longer, said Daniel. No, I interrupted, nipping that one in the bud immediately. It's fine. I was just under the impression that I was being contracted for a few days here. Not all won't go, he said, nonplussed. It's a school now. I was just going to take a test drive with them, and then you can drop us off, and Dad can phone you in at the weekend sometime. Yeah, that should work out. My mum's usually away at weekends, said Jemima quietly. A little shoot of hope sprouted forth from the black beam of my internal mood. Drop them off? As in, they're not even going to supervise me taking the ship back to the Yubatsu venue? I could have crossed the black and been safely surrounded by fellow pirates before the night was over. And bringing them the platinum god of whale sharks might even buy me a spot in a top bunk right off the bat. There was still the matter of warning. Maybe she wanted to be dropped off somewhere too. If she didn't, I could always drop her off in one way or another. Travel, that was a dumb thing out of nowhere. Well, how about just a tour of the solar system then? I said aloud, linked energy. Flyover of Saturn's rings is something you have to do once in your life. Hell, you're still young, let's do it twice for kicks. That sounds awesome, said Jemima, not looking away from the view. Awesome, parroted Daniel. Then he felt confident enough to move an inch closer and initiate about hover handling. I set a course for Saturn, gunned what passed for the main thruster, and gripped the joysticks with a silent sigh of relief. There was something very pleasing about not having to kidnap the two children. Even disregarding the complications it would have created, I'd be proud if I wasn't starting to love the little packets. Daniel was still a little dogmatic, but the knowledge that he had partially been doing all of this to impress a girl sort of recontextualized him a bit. There was a certain pathetic lovability about it, like a dog holding its bone in its mouth. And Jemima's reaction to seeing space had made me feel a little warm inside. My first gaze into the abyss had been similar, and it was something I saw so rarely these days, now that people thought they could get the experience just as well from immersion simulators, or by going out onto their roof garden in the middle of a quiet night and looking out. We flew past Luna, glancing briefly at the lights of Mexico City, under the colossal plexiglass shell that the moon wore like a sparkling monocle. Jemima remained by my side, hypnotized by the stars, so of course Daniel stuck around, fidgeting with his fingers. In contrast, I don't think he looked out of the window at all since Jemima had come aboard. His attention alternated between being focused entirely on her and combing his fingers through his highlighted forelock. Experience transporting tourists had taught me that the scenery tends to get samey very fast, and right on cue, Jemima resumed the discussion after Luna was behind us and the views awash with blackness again. So are you really truly Jacques McCain? She asked, turning and half perching on my console. It totally is, answered Daniel on my behalf. Bet he can't prove it, she said. She seemed more excited, bobbing on her heels and clasping her hands. Ask him something about the books. Something, only Jacques McCain would know. I will, okay. He bought the book. An alarm sounded. My touchscreen started flashing red, and the console in front of the counter Don't worry, this is pretty common. 9 times out of 10, it's just misaligned. I'll be gone about half an hour to fix it. Daniel, Jemima. I put a hand on one shoulder for each of them. I need you to step up for me. I won't be long, but if any more red lights come on, I need you to stay calm, be strong, and let me know as soon as possible. Can you do that? Daniel's chest swelled. Yes, sir. Jemima nodded. Good. Stay here. I jogged out of the bridge, then slowed immediately to a walk when I was confident that I was out of sight. There was no reason to start worrying until at least 5 of the cooling rods were down. On top of that, I knew perfectly well why the rod had deactivated, because I had told it to. Every time I started work with a new ship, I made a point of learning the quickest way to make an alarm go off that doesn't actually damage the ship. It was always handy to be able to manufacture myself a coffee break on short notice, and on this occasion I had to swiftly reacquaint myself with Jack McEwen trivia before the grilling continued. I headed for the reading room. I wouldn't be able to read all of the plying things, but I had a familiarity with the events in the books, mainly because most of the bitter conversations I'd had in the branded bracket drifted to the topic of which McEwen books ripped off whose stories. I just have to hope that giving the titles and the blurbs a quick once-over would give me enough to bull track with. I met Wharton in the corridor outside the reading room, and she followed me in like a cat hanging around expecting to be fed. What was that alert sound? She demanded. I made a beeline for the bookshelf. Minor engine fault, I said casually, not with a back of that. 2-second fix, don't worry about it. So, nothing's going wrong. I ran my finger along the garish spines. There were only about 30 books in McEwen's entire canon, but the shelves had been supplied with every book in every edition, format, box set, and special edition re-release, with the searing attention to detail and a true science fact. I said. There was a surge of energy, and I felt a stifling heat on one side of my body, as if someone had opened the door of a preheated oven. Instinctively, I dived away from it, landing on my back in time to see a sphere of amplified blaster energy splatter across the quantum booth in the corner. The last few tendrils of orange-white energy slithered inside the booth's control panel. It gave a little electronic belch, and then the hot slag began to drool from around the screws and the gaps between the keys. I looked at Warden. She was holding my blaster outstretched, all immediate problems setting. Both she and I flinched as she fired again, the shot melting one of the upper corners of the quantum booth's shuttered doorway and ensuring its permanent uselessness. How about now? She asked coolly. Chapter 13. I was still lying on my back by the bookshelf, propped up on my elbows. On instinct, I made an attempt to quickly move into a standing position, which was immediately aborted when I found myself staring down the barrel of my own gun. Not for the first time, but on this occasion someone else was holding it. What are you doing? I asked, displaying my palms and trying not to sound too interrogative. I'm making a career change, she said. I'm going to kidnap Daniel and Jemima, and you are going to help me. Her voice was the same as always, condescending and professional, but the end of the gun was shaking, and I could see lines of sweat escaping from her hairline. I hoped she hadn't gone insane. I could always handle sane people. Sane people are predictable. It's practically the definition of the word. I was about to ask why she was doing this, but that seemed like a fatuous question. Is this about being made a divisional head? I am not going to end up like Brian Pritchard. I will not allow myself to be until Henderson needs another gun. Stand up. I did so, keeping my hands where she could see them. She was smart enough to stay a good 2 arm lengths away, keeping the gun trained on me. Okay, so what exactly is your plan from this point? She moved to the door and gestured with the gun, instructing me to head for it. We will fly this ran out of my grabbing range and matched my speed. Together we shuffled along the expensive carpet like a pair of slugs negotiating the floor of a salt factory. You know, you'll laugh when you hear this, I said hopefully, but I was actually planning to do something along the same lines. Yes, McEwen, I am fully aware of that, so all we have to do now is continue according to that plan, with the slight modification that we are now partners in the crime. I stopped and turned on my heel, and she promptly froze, hand tightening on the gun. So you don't have to keep pointing the gun at me, I said, exasperated. We're on the same page, right? That will remain to be seen, replied Warden, gun unmoved. Proceed to the bridge. I got halfway through turning around again, then stopped. We don't need the kids. We can just drop them off when they're finished sightseeing and make for the black. Then it's barely even a crime. Don't be dense, McEwen. Henderson would have us blasted out of the sky for disloyalty alone. While we have his son, we have leverage. We can release them as soon as we are out of Henderson's reach. Alright, so maybe we're not on the same page. What do you mean, release them? So we'll cut them loose as soon as we're in the middle of the black and give them €20 yen for the rickshaw home, will we? You're good at improvising. I'll let you come up with something. By this point we were outside the door to the bridge, and from the other side I could hear scrips and scraps of the most stilted and awkward conversation in the history of courtship. I turned around, keeping my back to the door, and was pinned into place by the gun, still aimed squarely at my chest. Once we go through this door, there's no turning back, I advised. There'll be no more chances to change your mind. You know perfectly well we could do this without bringing the kids into it. But when we go in there and tell Daniel that he's being kidnapped, Henderson will be after us both for the rest of our lives. Hints of emotion rippled across her face. A twitch of an eyebrow here, a wobble of the corner of the mouth there. She took a deep breath, and all was stone again. Henderson is not all-powerful. Until recently I thought that he was. I'd never seen any scheme of his not go entirely according to his desires. She paused lengthily. She was either meditating on the thought or waiting for my prompt. And then what? Her eyes narrowed. And then I saw him swallow that a two-bit out-of-work star pilot could actually be Jacques McEwen. All right, I sighed. Fine. You didn't have to make personal comments. And you can be the one to tell them then, since you're insisting. Fine. She jiggled the gun back. Open the door. I turned around and did so. Daniel was sitting in his captain's chair, and Jemima was standing nearby, leaning on his console with arms folded. As we entered, they both boggled at us like deer in headlights. "Whoa, is that a gun?" asked Daniel, pertinently. "What's going on?" asked Jemima. Her hands gestured uncertainly behind her. I'm supposed to be back home." I looked back at Warden, gathering my hands behind me, looking at her with polite expectation. Bits of her face were quivering again, as if every individual muscle was taking part in a heated debate over whether this was still a good idea. "Well," I said, "isn't there something you'd like to tell our passengers?" "Maybe I am kidnapping you. Remain calm and make no attempt to resist, and you will be returned unharmed to your families in due time." The kids maintained their boggle-eyed looks as if she hadn't said anything at all. Then Daniel smacked both his hands over his eyes with what sounded like quite injurious force, and he emitted the same "ugh" sound he'd made at the Jemima asked him. "My dad is so embarrassing," he wailed. "He's making this warden pretend to kill us. He's always interfering." "Your dad is really weird," said Jemima. I leaned toward an unmoving warden and whispered as close to her ear as the gun would allow. Seems like I was wrong back there when I said that was your last chance to back out. Her face flashed thunder at me. Teasing her probably wasn't doing me any favours, and if your phone's out, turn them off and give them to me. To me, she said, "Get into the pilot's seat. Set a course." I shrugged and made my way around the perimeter of the bridge to the pilot console, as Jemima in the center watched, worried, rotating like a lighthouse. "Do surrounding the solar system and every other major human settlement. A significantly large majority of the galaxy that only I and my peers were willing to attempt to cross without quantum leap. And our needs are to find a pirate clan that won't immediately strip us for parts the moment we show up in a glittering banana yacht. I said, partly to myself. Yes, Mr. McKeown, that adequately
Did it work that
describes our
time?
needs.
No.
Might probably be the best bet, I thought. Our
doing that
relationship was
time
based
jump
on
thing.
mutual dislike, but they technically owe me one.
But you still
Right
feel
then,
exhausted.
I muttered, plotting a course for
Yeah.
an asteroid belt near Canterbury. Warden leaned over my shoulder, watching my inputs carefully. Hi, said Jemima directly behind
Try it
us.
out a third time. It'll work
Warden
this
spun
time.
and pointed my gun at her. Jemima cringed apologetically, holding out a This is something Mr. Henderson arranged. Could we do it, some other time? Only I didn't tell my mum. Warden sighed like a housewife whose nervous dog was terrified of the vacuum cleaner and took the phone. I'm afraid I do not care about how your mother feels about it, Jemima. Mr. Henderson did not organize this, and I am actually kidnapping you. She says she's actually kidnapping us, called Jemima back to Daniel. No, she isn't, said Daniel stubbornly. It's my stupid dad. Warden stood politely still as Jemima held her chin, frowned, and scrutinized Warden with the gun. Are you sure? I mean, this is exactly the sort of thing that tends to happen when, people who work for your dad. No, it's totally my dad. But can you be sure? Yeah, because he's telling me so. There was an audible snap sound as Warden and I both whipped our necks around to look at Daniel. He was holding a slim, expensive phone to his ear and listening with eyes rolled heavenward. Warden's face, already pale from a lifetime of staying in doing administration, turned the colour of an unpainted papier-mâché project. Then she moved with the suddenness of a jumping spider, launching herself at Daniel's phone. She misjudged the height of the metallic railing around the captain's chair and face-planted into the deep pile carpet. Her head rose after an embarrassed second of stillness to meet the gaze of a startled Daniel, who was almost leaning far enough back in his chair to turn himself two-dimensional. He held out his phone toward Warden. "You want to do this?" She simply zipped up right. There was maybe the briefest glimpse of a transitionary phase, during which she appeared to be in the fetal position about 1 foot off the floor, and then she was standing, smoothing down the creases in her business attire. All eyes were on her as she took the phone, and, her hand shaking almost imperceptibly, held it to her ear. "Yes," she said, after listening for a few tense moments. "Yes," she added, gaining confidence. "Yes," she clarified. Her conversation with Henderson continued in this rather monotonous fashion until she suddenly glanced at me. "Yes," she reiterated thoughtfully. She offered the phone. "He wants to talk to you." Her complexion was far beyond merely pale. She looked like all her blood had been replaced with correctional fluid. I took the phone from a hand resembling a bunch of cold chicken bones in a surgical glove. I took the phone and felt a little spark of hope. Warden was weakened, dividing her attention between too many factors. Perhaps this was the opportunity to throw her back into the clutches of the bear while I made a run for it. I brought the phone to my ear. "I already told him we're working together on this," said Warden, apparently reading the look on my face. "Hello, Jack," came Mr. Henderson's voice, dangerously level. "How is Daniel's trip going?" I'd been preparing some statement along the lines of, "Oh God, she's gone insane, send help," but Warden's comment, closely followed by Henderson's greeting, had derailed my words on their way to my mouth. "What?" was all I could manage. "Jack, could you do me a favour?" said the familiar voice on the phone, entirely devoid of Henderson's usual good cheer. "Mr. Henderson," I said, trying to get things back on track, "could you look behind you? Could you do that for me?" I was peering over my shoulder before it could even occur to me to disobey, and I found myself staring at a blank section of bulkhead by the door. Allegedly gold-coloured, but more like the colour of urine. "Why? Now look down." did so, straining uncomfortably. I saw only the backs of my shoes, or at least the small percentage of fluid extruded from the ridiculously thick cup. Yes? What you're doing there, Jack, is watching your back. And I just wanted to give you a head start because you're going to be doing a lot of that from now on. By which I mean watching your back, Jack. Oh, I said grimly. Mr. Henderson, whatever Warden said, oh, don't get me wrong, it's hard warning, it really is. You and her running off together, love triumphant across the class divide. There was a wobble in his spiteful tone of voice that was probably more to do with murderous rage than being touched by the Romans. I've got a lump in my throat. Have you got a lump in your throat, Jack? I couldn't decide what aspect of this conversation was the most horrifying. What? Because if you do, I've got a whole room full of knives expressly designed for removing that sort of thing. Now I know you're a man who's had a lot of empty threats, so I won't waste your time. First thing I'm going to do now is call your publisher and see exactly how much trouble I can make for you, yeah? I hastened to get a word in edgeways. But what about Daniel? Oh, I thought that went without saying. I'm going to have all my best talent hound you to the edge of the universe. And then, as long as not a hair or Danny's head has been harmed, I will make your deaths as quick as I can be bothered to make them. Oh, but I hate planning too far ahead. Maybe I'll just ring you, yeah? See you soon. He hung up with furious speed. I grimaced, despondent, at the dead screen of the phone. I shared a stony-faced, tight-lipped glance with Warden. So embarrassing, said Daniel. Chapter 14. Well, thanks a flying bunch, I muttered, hands on the joysticks, busily jerking them like a cuckolded farmhand at the counter. Warden, perching on the console beside me for want of another chair. She'd only just returned from throwing Jemima and Daniel's smartphones out of the airlock, and the airlock still wasn't properly sealed, so her hair had become a lot more tangled. Getting me caught up in your psycho-div kidnap plan? We already agreed that we both had an interest in fleeing to the Black. I didn't agree to saying as much to Henderson's plying face, I pointed out, and I wanted on record that I was completely against bringing the kids into this. I half turned in my chair and meaningfully caught Jemima's gaze. Is this some kind of good kidnapper, bad kidnapper thing? She asked, twiddling her fingers. If it makes you feel any better, McKeown, said Warden, pushing every word out of her mouth like a bitter cherry stone, I am the one who has flung themselves into the unknown. You are the one who has experience with the Black. I am not the one who has friends among pirates. Friends? I repeated. I give them things they want and they don't blow me up. They're not on my plying Christmas card list. Maybe you should, park somewhere and think your plan through properly, called Jemima. Two factions had naturally formed within the bridge around the only two available chairs. Daniel was still in the captain's seat, with Jemima perched on one of his armrests. He had crammed himself aside in case he accidentally were so ungallant as to touch her posterior with his elbow. Said Daniel, bored. Please don't go along with my dad's stupid plan to take over my holiday like he always does. No, dude, I think it might be for real, said Jemima conspiratorially. You saw how she went for your phone. She went, mental. Dad just didn't want the surprise being spoiled. Just probably taking us to some lame pizza restaurant so he could sing happy birthday and be really embarrassing. Warden watched me testily. She was holding my blaster loosely by her side. My chair was on casters. At any moment I could have made a swift kick, followed by a swift grab, and then she'd have to stop pretending to be the one in charge. And then I could wave my doits around like a big strong man before going back to doing exactly what we were already doing. Because any victory I could have over Warden at this point would be a hollow one with Henderson on our tail. Like it or not, and that was a pretty huge and emphatic or not as or nots go, I was going to have to see this kidnapping thing through. But that didn't mean I couldn't grumble as I flew the ship, and tried not to think about being savaged by reindeer sweaters. After a couple of hours of awkward non-conversation, we reached the trebuchet gate that served the solar system. This was the first step in getting some serious distance between us and our mini problems on Earth and Luna. Trebuchet gates were the answer to long-distance space travel before quantum tunneling came along. They were massive corkscrew-like devices that harnessed the kinetic energy from the movements of nearby star systems to slingshot individual ships massive distances within a sort of static warp bubble missile. Most of the galaxy was littered with the things. In fact, the standard definition of known space was everything within a certain distance of a trebuchet gate. They had the advantage over quantum tunneling in that you didn't need to have another device at the destination point for them to work. You just had to be prepared for whatever unknown horrors you might end up stranded in the middle of. Quantum tunneling could claim every other advantage, of course, like lower energy usage. A lot of space environmentalists have complained that the trebuchet system had accelerated the life cycles of several stars by many millions of years.
So, you know how I said we were supposed to do a charity? Well, we didn't qualify because we're too small.
And then there was the issue that trebuchet jumping
So don't worry about it.
Cool. Probably see you on Sunday.
Yeah. Let me know when you're gonna start.
Okay.
Oh wait, see you Saturday for the dinner.
Still, I'd always felt
Yeah,
that the
see you
danger
then.
and gross overuse of energy was part of the romance and adventure that gave star piloting its allure. A small chance of death was the spice of life. Nevertheless, I opted not to mention any of this to my passengers. The trebuchet gate was visible through the viewing dome. I started moving us along the illuminated spaceway leading up to it, which had originally been intended to manage the queue, and which was now, of course,
Hey Google.
I was about to key into the gate's automated systems when I felt my phone.
Okay Google.
I must have been able to refresh its battery now near a modern electrical system with wireless charge support. I glanced at Warden. She was keeping their eye on the kids as they took in the sight of the trebuchet gate's crawling form. I subtly nudged my phone halfway out of the pocket to see the screen. Unknown number, it said. I made a snap decision. Break, I said, getting up. Warden glanced at the view screen. Can it not wait until we're out of the system? I glanced over my shoulder when I was already halfway to the door. Nah, it's smartest to be as biologically evacuated as possible before starting a trebuchet jump, I said. Again, it was easiest to tell the truth. Once I was in the corridor with my back to the closed door, I took the call, holding the phone like it could turn red hot and burn my ear at any moment. Hello? Is this Mr. Jacques McHugh, the author? The voice was female, businesslike, and sounded slightly worried with just the mildest injection of spite. I looked back at the door for an instant, as if I could somehow see Warden through it. Yes, that's me, I said unhappily. Who is this? Emily, said the alleged Emily, as if I should have known that. Emily from Blase Books, your publisher. Sent you emails? Oh, I said, nodding slowly as my eyes darted around. Yeah, Emily. Is this a bad time? Asked Emily. I'm fairly certain there was sarcasm there. No, not at all, I said. What's this about? Is that all you have to say, Mr. McHugh? We've been trying to open a dialogue with you for years. You never reply to emails, you refuse to give us your phone number. Or do I have you to give it out to some very strange man you're doing some kind of contract work for? I assembled a few puzzle pieces in my head. Henderson called you. I did get a response. I guess he was really very angry about something. I didn't catch the full details. The moment I put a word in edgeways, I asked for the number he had for you. I rubbed my eye with my free hand. Did he tell you to do something to me? Something I wouldn't like? He didn't seem to be listening. It really is very maddening that we have only now been able to talk one-on-one. It's really very unprofessional. And while I suggest, Mr. McHugh, that perhaps he wouldn't need to take contract work if he would finally allow us to pay you for... Emily, please, listen. This man, Henderson, what did he tell you to... I finally passed the sentence I interrupted. Pay me for what? No, Jack, Henderson doesn't want to pay you for anything. Please pay attention. It's really very rude. We are the ones who are trying to pay you. Pay me for what? I repeated impatiently. For books. Remember those books we publish that you write? Honestly, what else would we want to pay you for? Look, I have your number and your chip ID now. Can I just transfer the money associated account. Yes, I said. The word escaped before it had even had a chance to cross my mind. I was, after all, still a star pilot. But hold on. Are you saying that I haven't been paid for a book? There were some slightly adorable shocked noises before the reply came. For goodness sake, Mr. McKeown, what on earth kind of income do you have that you haven't noticed? We haven't paid you for any books. Not until now. Every time we email, we ask for your bank details, but all you ever send to us is manuscripts. We even tried searching the bank databases for your name and address, but that came empty. Really, very unprofessional. Have you considered hiring an agent if you're so busy? Sorry, I said, dreamily. My head was starting to spin. I leaned on a bulkhead for comfort. It's all right, Mr. McKeown. It's just that the tax people were starting to ask questions about all this money we allegedly paid you still sitting in our account. Oh, and since you're answering the phone now, I wonder if you'd like to hear a couple of appearance offers. Some of them can be really very effective. My arm suddenly lacked the strength to hold the phone up. It fell to my side, causing the call to automatically end. I'd just stolen from the real Jacques McKeown. I'd plied him up on behalf of all pilot kind. My arm strength suddenly returned and the phone came back up again so I could check the balance on my account. Then I had to bring my other hand up and swipe across because the number wouldn't fit on the screen. It was the kind of amount that makes you immediately terrified of the inevitable karmic backlash. Right on cue, the door beside me flew open, and Warden was there. Her eyes flicked from the phone in my hand to my face, and she bared her teeth. "Who were you talking to?" she demanded. Then something approaching concern crossed her face. "McKeown, you've gone white. Who was that on the phone? Henderson? You should have gotten rid of it." I couldn't help myself. Right then and right there, I had to share it with someone. It was too big for one mind to toss around alone. And Warden might have been right up there on my least favourite people in the universe list, but she was the only one who knew who I really was.
Hi, what can I get for you?
Can I have a 3-piece box, please?
Yeah, no problem. Was it regular or large for that one?
Just regular. Oh, did you have a deal on Wicked Wings?
Yeah, we have $10 for 10 wicked wings.
So yeah, can I just have that instead? $10 Wicked Wings?
Yeah, no problem.
So yeah, just the Wicked Wings, thanks.
Yeah, that's $10 in total. You're right to drive down.
Cool, thanks. Thanks.
Not Henderson. Publisher. Jacques McKeown has never gotten around to collecting his money. Henderson told them I was him, so they've just sent me everything they owed him. Warden's brow immediately went like a car crash. She was born of the corporate environment, of course, so this clearly made even less sense to her than it did to me. You have stolen McKeown's royalties. Yeah, I said. A slightly insane grin pulled my lips apart now that I had sounded it all out, and I laughed. Yeah, that plying, story-stealing bracket, profiting off us all while we're eating out of the bins. Looks like we got the last laugh. She rolled her eyes around, thinking. Except, if what you're saying is true, he has not profited at all. He has not accepted any money for exploiting you people. A few unpleasant thoughts dropped into my mind with echoey, ominous plops. My elation was still there, somewhere, but now it felt like someone listening to very loud music at the back of a funeral service. Yeah, but now you have. Her statement hung in the air for a moment, then some kind of missile struck the ship, and we were both flung into the bulkhead. I laboriously disentangled myself from Warden and made it most of the way back to my console, just in time for another missile to fling me off my feet and cause my face to smash into the back of my chair. "We're under attack!" relayed Jemima. She was almost fully crouched and clinging to the center railing with both hands. Daniel was still sitting in the captain's chair, propping his chin on his hand indifferently. "That was just way too hard." I threw myself into the pilot's seat and checked the damage report. The ship informed me with large flashing red letters that it had sustained damage. This flying ship had the computer interface of a poorly researched movie. But none of the major functions seemed to be damaged, and there were no hull breaches. I suspected it was a warning shot, even though such things are. Ship around to face the blips on the radar and saw a cluster of buff-coloured ships arranged in a threatening attack pattern. I saw two of them break from the group and move across into a flanking position, covering both sides of the route to the trebuchet gate.
Thanks.
"It's not pirates, is it?" Jemima allowed. "We're still in the policed areas, aren't we?" "No, it's not pirates, it's my dad," insisted Daniel. "You may have a point," muttered Warden, suddenly beside me again. "Henderson may be sending mercenaries, but they shouldn't have found us this quickly," I finished, distracted by my display. I had brought up a zoomed view of what seemed to be the leading ship. It looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. It had the faintly organic design I associated with the just barely spacefaring extrasolar races, who were still more comfortable with designing plows and combine harvesters than spaceships. But there were also custom augmentations more consistent with human aesthetics, a sleeker nose cone, an out-of-place set of silver fins. The pilot hailed us with a video call, and an image immediately came up of a hulking figure completely silhouetted against firelight. Nevertheless, I recognized him immediately. An open fire in an enclosed atmosphere will lead to death or the need for a supremely expensive air filtration system, either of which requires a psychotic level of devotion to your image. "Angela," I said, by way of greeting. "Address me not by that name, steward of falsehood," boomed the man I had last seen getting his armor polished at Frobisher's laundry. "Bad enough that for years thou wouldst sully the same air as I, professing hatred for deeds thou thyself had committed. Bad enough that without thee addressing me with such familiarity." "Friend of yours," said William quietly, very slightly a question, but mostly identifying aloud with no small amount of relief. I was almost relieved too. My list of potential threats had been fluctuating so wildly lately, I'd almost forgotten that all my former colleagues still wanted me dead. There was something comforting about knowing that at least one state of affairs remained stable. "Listen, what would you rather I call you then?" He shifted in his seat, and for a moment a flicker of firelight revealed that he was leaning on the hilt of his sword. "Address me as Nemesis, as I name thee traitor," he growled. "Address me as the avenging hammer of justice brought down upon thee, as though all pilot kind doth hold the hilt." Behind me I heard Jemima audibly untense. "Oh, thank God, this whole thing actually had me going for a while. I really literally thought we were being kidnapped for real." "I told you it's so fake, isn't it?" said Daniel. The emotionless blackness of Angelo's silhouetted face glared at me. I said, "Listen, Mr. Nemesis, your companions would mock me," he hissed. All those years of hunting jungle monsters to lay their carcasses before his uninterested alien queen had made his his hearing pretty sharp. Inform them that I would not spare thy household to reduce thee to stardust, traitor. I shushed the children and made a gesture with my hands as if holding up an invisible volume. Okay, hear me out, I said to the unmoving black outline on the screen. I actually have a really large amount of money. Angelo's ship, still visible in the zoomed-in view, launched a missile. A white triangle expanded rapidly, filling the view as the torpedo sped toward us. I slammed on the joysticks, and the Platinum god of whale sharks, or the Jemima depending, immediately began to speculate upon the possibility of taking evasive action. The ship's components finally reached enough of a consensus, and she began lumbering into a barrel roll, at which point an explosion in her underbelly accelerated it a bit. Face thy death with dignity, Jacques McKeown, said Angelo. Do not waste thy vital moments with bargains. Use thy many names shall adorn thy tombstone. I checked the readout. According to the one warning window that wasn't a pop-up advertisement, we had a hull breach. It was in food storage, which was easy enough to section off from the rest of the internal environment, but most of the ship's inventory of potato chips and ice cream was now lost to the pitiless void of space. Warden took the opportunity to address the communicator. Enemy vessel, there are innocents on board this ship. She's right, there are, I said, nodding rapidly. Thou would hide behind children, sneered Angelo. Your dishonor knows new depths with every passing second. Trying way too hard, commented Daniel in a sing-song voice. It's not very realistic with the whole medieval talk thing, is it? Added Jemima, not quietly enough. It's really, 20th century. Listen, I hissed, leaning close to Warden. Push the innocence thing. These guys are big on honor. She nodded and turned back to the communicator. Enemy ship, she said. Would you be willing to spare the rest of us if McKeown surrendered to you alone? I immediately shoved her away and started making static sounds with my mouth. Shh, you're breaking up, stay on the line. Then I ended the call and opened and closed my fists at Warden a few times before finding the words. What is wrong with your brain? I was merely assessing all available options, he said coldly. I gestured to the ships. Those brackets are all or nothing, lads, I said. It's like seeking forgiveness and asking permission. I might have let you go if you hadn't been so unclassy as to ask them. Nevertheless, we seemed to have given them cause for thought. Together, we looked at the ships, hanging silently and unmoving in space. And then, after a couple of seconds contemplation time, every single one of them started emitting volleys of blaster fire. This time I was somewhat more prepared, and the engines had warmed up a little, so I was able to use the sheer distance between me and them to anticipate where the shots were going and carefully arrange for the ship to be elsewhere. But the distance was closing fast. The Platinum god of whale sharks actually had a fairly competitive top speed. It was just getting there that was the problem. The thing accelerated like manure, making its way out of a cow's arse. I pulled both joysticks back with one arm and used the other to set everything I could find on the touchscreen interface to maximum. I could only hope that Angelo and his friends wouldn't be able to get into close range before our speed topped out. I scanned the nearby area. Nothing but space, with a few asteroids to weave around, a bit of texture, like me in my element evasion-wise. Even without my usual suite of pre-programmed movement sequences, give me a few tons of rock and I could wipe any pursuer off like track on a T-train. On a level playing field, and open space is about as level as it gets, then it comes down to who showed up in the best ship. In this case, that debate would end with one word. The word was canoe. The trebuchet gate was the way out. All I had to do was make a beeline for it, setting its firing angle as I approached, then get ourselves launched the moment we were in range. The beauty of the system was that it was impossible to tell precisely where we'd be flung to. But before I could do that, I had to get into a position where there wasn't a throng of hairy murderers between us and the gate. We reached top speed, which was helpfully indicated by the entire ship vibrating violently and ringing with the musical squeaks and pings of screws coming undone. Angelo's little lynch mob of a fleet kept in hot pursuit, just far enough away to be the size of murderous crows on the viewing screen. I was dodging their missiles with well-timed rolls, but it was was only a matter of time before that wouldn't cut it anymore. Turning at this speed in this ship was like pushing a boulder up a hill. But that gave me an idea. I scrutinized Angelo's ships through the rear view. They were stocky attack ships, well armored, built for making head-on attacks and soaking up damage, well suited to Angelo and other overcompensating warrior types with the opinion that dodging is for girls. All of which meant that they too were at a disadvantage at speed. They could deliver a nasty frontal charge to get them in the thick of it as fast as possible, but they lost confidence if the charge went on too long. They couldn't maneuver well. Hold on to something, I warned, flexing my hands like a concert pianist in preparation. I felt Warden grip the back of my chair urgently. You know, this is actually getting exciting, said Jemima, obediently clutching a length of railing. Daniel grunted and swung his chair back and forth, bored. I waited for the brief pause between volleys of missiles as the pursuers let their tubes cool down, then made my move. I put both joysticks up and the ship began to pitch forward, describing a downward arc. Just as I knew they would, I saw our pursuers begin to plot a similar path, curving downward to get us back into their sights. But at that moment I dropped our speed to 0. The ship was no better at decelerating, but its turning jets became more and more effective as we slowed, rolling us into a tight little spiral as Angelo's ship sailed away above us, no doubt wondering where the hell we'd gone. Then, when our ship was pointed upward, a squat nose cone aimed at the dissipating vapor trail Angelo's fleet had left behind, I put the speed back up to maximum. That was where it all went wrong. Instead of the expected burst of acceleration, there was a smoky cough from somewhere behind us. Something important sounding made a rather distressing noise, then the engines fell silent. The touchscreen flashed red and blinked to itself for a few seconds as I drummed my fingers on the joysticks, frozen in a dynamic piloting pose worthy of a dramatic escape. Warden broke the silence with a polite cough. What was the plan, McHugh? No one ever looks up, I muttered. Excuse me? We could have gotten out of their sight and ended up above them. They wouldn't have figured out where we'd gone until it was too late. Because no one ever thinks to look up. We would have been halfway to the gate by the time they realized. I see. So what went wrong? The engine failed. And why did it fail? I read the words flashing red before me. Engine overheat error, it read. Probable cause, coolant fraud deactivated by user. It just did, I said through my teeth. Angelo and his hunting party rose back into view like an elevator full of grizzly bears arriving at my floor. I palmed the touchscreen rapidly, but it seemed to have frozen on a red screen stating that, for our comfort and convenience, all engine functions had been disabled for cooling. I took issue with the comfort part. Make thy peace, Jacques McHugh, said Angelo, peering momentarily at the screen again. I'm not Jacques McHugh, I revealed loudly, when their missile tubes began to glow. They're making me pretend to be Jacques McHugh, that doint back there. Yeah, I knew that, said Jemima. Daniel looked over his shoulder, wondering what doint I was talking about. Pathetic, intoned Angelo.